Washington offers a block. The blitz comes from the other side. DeQuell Jackson.
And now again, DeQuell Jackson.
You're listening to Bleav in Colts with co-hosts Lawrence Owen and DeQuell Jackson, bringing you the latest and greatest about the shoe.
Brady, middle, intercepted by DeQuell Jackson. Play fake, Bryant, intercepted, picked off at the 5, touchdown DeQuell Jackson.
Welcome back. I am here in Bleav in Colts. Lawrence Owen. Sorry, we weren't able to get DeQuell today. He is still dealing with personal issues. It might be a little while before he comes back, but I have a great special guest with me, Stephen Holder of The Athletic. Thank you so much for taking time out after the pressers today to join us and record the show.
Hey, you got it. I'm glad to be here, and definitely looking forward to DeQuell getting back in the lineup too.
Absolutely. Now, just in case there are 2 or 3 viewers or listeners that don't know who you are, why don't you take a moment here to let people know a little bit about you and where they can find you?
Yeah, so you can find me at The Athletic. I cover the Colts and the NFL at large. So we do tons of coverage there of all the teams in the NFL. And I'm on Twitter as well. My handle is Holder Stephen with a PH. Stephen Holder was taken, so there's that. So
wow.
So I took the next best thing. And so anyway, I just have had a great time covering the Colts this year. They're a fun team. They're never boring because, here we are again, 1-4 start, and then now 8-6, and they're nothing if not interesting. So that keeps me in business. It keeps the lights on, so I'll never complain.
Who doesn't like a little extra money? Well, if you're into gambling, BetOnline remains your number one spot for all your basketball, football, baseball, NHL, boxing, UFC, even your Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for this season and the next. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code BLEAV50, that's BLEAV50, to receive your bonus. Bet online, where the game starts. Now, obviously, we're going to get to the Saturday night game in just a moment, but I have a question that I've not asked a guest yet this far into the season, and I thought I'd ask you, what are some differences, positive or negative, that you see difference between this year's Indianapolis Colts at this point of the season and last year's Indianapolis Colts at this point of the season?
I think for one, last year's team, well, let me rephrase that. This year's team, I think there's been a definite rise in their performance over the course of the season. I think they had a little bit of a trend that way last year too, offensively, but not as much. I think there was just so much turmoil early this season that, I think they feel vindicated a little bit. They're not there yet. They haven't even clinched a playoff spot, right? But they do feel a little bit of vindication this year, I think, because they know what people were saying and they know how it looked and they know that it was daunting. I mean, how they saw it, they're not completely oblivious, even though they try to block out the outside. They know, and they know what 1-4 looks like. And it wasn't just that they were 1-4. It was just, it didn't look like they were functional in a lot of cases. A lot of the strengths of their team didn't look like strengths. What was the offensive line? All of a sudden there's a problem. What is that? And so I just think, as I said, the job is not done, but I do think they feel a little sense of vindication, like, you know what, we're pretty damn good. And I think it's really hard to argue that. They're a team, I think, that can beat literally anybody in the NFL right now. Doesn't mean they're perfect, but there is no perfect team. Ask Tom Brady. Okay.
Right.
Watched the game last night. So I just think, look, they're peaking at the right time. I would rather be the Colts right now than Arizona. Right.
Yeah, that absolutely.
Yeah.
So after the game against New England, and then I watched Arizona, and I was like, The Colts are going to blow Arizona out. At least that's my opinion of it. After watching both the games this weekend, I was like, holy crap.
Yeah, I mean, look, they go back to what I said about there being no perfect team. Even the team with the best record now is doing a whole lot of soul searching. So that's the NFL. It's really about this week, and what you did 6 or 7 weeks ago. I think the Colts have proven it doesn't matter. It matters in the grand scheme because it impacts your record, obviously. But just in terms of what it means for today's game or this week's game, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. And I think they are the best example of that, or one of the best examples of that. And I think it also, gives some indication of the value of Frank Reich, because there's definitely a trend here. I mean, they would much prefer to not start 1-5 and 1-4. Okay, let's be clear. But pulling a team out of that is so hard. It's so hard. The focus and the consistency that takes is incredibly hard. And I don't think people appreciate how hard that is, to week after week after week to stay consistent that way in a league where you can lose on any day. And so to have such little margin for error and to be able to be consistently good like that over an entire half of the season is pretty tough to do after a tough start.
Absolutely. I mean, it kind of references back to that last luck year when we started 0-3 and ended up making the playoffs, right?
Right.
But okay, so you talked about, the Colts playing very well, but they still haven't locked a playoff spot. They are 5th seed currently in the standings and tied with 5 other people, but they just have the better conference record to be in that spot. I got a question here by Justin that came off Twitter. Thanks for the question. He asks, how much thought are you putting into the Colts not only making the playoffs, but there is a slim possibility they could still win the AFC South, and even a possibility they could still win the number 1 seed in the AFC. Now, to me, that's a little bit of a, whoa, we're stretching here. We still got 3 games to go and need a lot of help, but right back at you right here.
Well, yeah, you're right. They do need a lot of help, but I will say this. I mean, Tennessee is definitely helping them. I'll give you that. I will tell you, I will say this about Tennessee. I mean, I think they're going to figure it out and get it done. I mean, I think they only really need to win 1 game at this point, but so look, you're talking about a really tall order, and I forget their schedule off the top of my head, but they've got a couple tough ones, but I know they've got at least 1 game where they're going to be heavily favored. I don't know if that's Jacksonville, I forget, but anyhow, the point is that a long shot? Absolutely. But I will tell you one thing that I would say about the 2 teams in particular, Tennessee and the Colts. The one thing that I have definitely gleaned from the last 6 weeks is that they are teams that are going in the opposite direction. Now, I know that Tennessee has some injury issues, and clearly the biggest one being Derrick Henry. I'm not downplaying that. I mean, if the Colts lost Jonathan Taylor, would they be a different team? Yeah, okay, no question. So I'm not suggesting that I'm surprised by that, but I mean, it is what it is, and they are where they are. And I guess they can get them back, and we'll see how that goes in terms of timing. But they definitely are teams right now are, I think, in polar opposite positions in terms of how they are currently playing. The Colts, I think, have put themselves in a situation where, with just the way they're performing, they're definitely ascending. I'm not saying the Titans are descending, but they're not tracking in a positive direction, in my estimation.
Hey, Colts fans. Thanks for watching DeQuell and I here on Bleav in Colts. While you're at this, please take a moment to smash the like button, hit subscribe if you're not subscribed, tag that notification bell so that you are notified next time we upload a video or go live, so that you can join in the conversation. Don't forget, you can share this stream. That would help us out a ton. If you enjoy this, share it. All you got to do is go right over here and click the share button, little red share button down here underneath, and share it to your favorite social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, wherever, doesn't matter. Thank you so much. On behalf of myself and DeQuell Jackson, have a good one. Enjoy the rest of the show. Yeah, going back to that game this past Saturday, obviously everybody in the everybody watching the game, everybody in the stadium, everybody on that field knew that the Indianapolis Colts wanted to run the football, and the Patriots just couldn't stop him, right? I mean, for the most part, the entire game, he was picking up 2, 3, 4 yards of carry, and then he busts off that big one. He had a couple 10-yard runs as well. How much does that help Carson Wentz having that offensive line and that running game and that defense to lean on?
A lot. And so I think the one thing that we've learned about Carson Wentz this year, and I think this has always been true, really, is that he's best when he can. I don't think he's this game manager that people are making him out to be. I think he can be more than that. I mean, he has a really big arm. He has great athletic ability. He can do things. He can create, So, like, he's not some guy who's just, like, riding shotgun. As bad as he played on Saturday night, because I thought that was terrible. I don't think he played well. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. That was a pretty terrible performance. But at the same time, I think that they're not here without him. There's no question about it. They're not in this position without him because it all works together. The running game helps the quarterback. The quarterback helps the running game. Clearly, it helps a lot more when you've got a guy like Jonathan Taylor and you've got that offensive line. So I'm not going to also downplay that. But let's be honest now, okay? They would have a lot tougher time if they didn't have a quarterback who was capable of throwing it down the field. Okay, bring the safety up at your peril. Okay, They didn't hit any big ones on Saturday night, but they have hit some big ones this year. That's on tape. Teams have seen it. So if you're willing to bring that safety down to stop Jonathan Taylor, that's something you have to invest some thought into. And so with a quarterback who's less of a threat, that's an easier decision. So it all works together. And if nothing else, you've got to have a threat at quarterback. They definitely have a threat. Now, whether he always makes the right play, and always, makes the right decision, yeah, I get those questions. That's fine. And they're very much warranted. But there's no doubt in my mind that his presence there for the Colts behind center is making a difference. And the other thing I would say is that the Colts are best positioned when I think Carson Wentz, as I was kind of starting to say, and I got off track, but they're best positioned when he doesn't have to do too much. And it's not that he can't do it. I don't want people to misunderstand this. It's not that he can't do it. He can make every throw. He can make any play. The thing is, I think when you start putting a lot on him, that's when the tendency to make the bad mistake happens. So the best thing they can do is to ask him to do some of those things, but just in smaller doses. And I think that's where he's most efficient. And that's what they have done this year. When he's been most successful, it's been when he's had to do things kind of when they've asked him to do things on their terms and not in a situation where it was mandatory because the situation called for it. So I hope that makes sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. DeQuell likes to say that Carson Wentz plays his best when his, passing stats are somewhere between 25 to 30 attempts, 30 maximum, right? And I tend to agree with that. And I also agree yesterday in his 12 attempts, he had a bad game. And yes, they were one of the best pass defenses in the NFL. The Patriots are, but there was a lot of bad throws by Wentz. He had that one interception, and he had a couple more that very well could have been intercepted.
Got
right?
Lucky.
Yeah. A great play by Pittman on that pass that was thrown well behind him to get that ball out of J.C. Jackson's hands. We're going to move on because so Mario Borelli has another question on here about the game. And it's not just about the game, but what we've seen throughout the season. And I'm going to kind of reword it, Mario. I apologize, but we watched the Colts walk into the fourth quarter with a 20-0 lead. We've seen this multiple times. I started having flashbacks fourth quarter. I don't know if you did as well, but I started having week 4 flashbacks against the Ravens, and I'm like, I've seen this movie before. I don't want to see the same ending. And it started happening, and I started getting a little bit worried. The Colts have been giving up a lot of leads. Like, they get the lead in the first and then allow teams to come back. where does the blame go in this? Because I'm watching the film. I watched the game this time probably 4 or 5 different times trying to look at that in the fourth quarter. And after 12 minutes and 40 seconds left in the fourth quarter, 90% of the defensive plays, all the defensive backs were playing soft coverage. Is this traditional? Is this an Eberflus thing? Is this a player thing? Or is this just a common situation in the NFL?
Well, in that particular situation, I think what you're trying to do there is you're trying to prevent the big play, which makes sense. I mean, strategically, that actually, is probably what you want to do when you're protecting the lead. They figured, in their mind, okay, if we keep everything in front of us, they'll have to go 10 or 12 plays to score. They'll run clock, and maybe they make a mistake, and they did get a couple interceptions in the game, right? So that's a sound strategy, I think. I mean, it doesn't mean it's going to work. It's just, I think it's probably what you want to do in that situation. However, to the original question in terms of why these leads have kind of gotten shaky in second halves, the interesting thing is that we're looking for a common thread, and I don't think there is one. The reason I say that is because I think if you look at these games, they've all played out in different fashions. So with the Tampa Bay game, for example, I really think the turnovers really, I mean, look, there are other considerations. I know we can talk about play selection, and there's a conversation to be had there. That's fine. But the turnovers really are what did it, right? I think if you don't give the ball back to Tom Brady 5 times, it's probably a different outcome. I mean, if with one fewer turnover, they probably win the game. I firmly believe that. With one fewer turnover, they probably managed to get out of there with the win. And then that conversation, right, about winning the division suddenly becomes a different conversation. But be that as it may, that was one thing. Then I think if you look at the second Tennessee game, I think Wentz did have a little bit of a meltdown in that game. There's no question about that. So, that was somewhat on him. There were other factors too. Certainly there's some defensive miscues that I think we can talk about. But I think, certainly Wentz took a lot of that on his shoulders. And I'm not going to argue him on that one. So, I think the Baltimore game, that's the other one I was going to mention. The Baltimore game, honestly, first of all, that was a Murphy's Law game, meaning everything that could go wrong went wrong. But honestly, if you really just break it down to really specific things, if they have a competent kicker who's not hurt in that game, they probably win. Let's just be honest, right? So I guess what I'm saying is, like, these aren't excuses. They're just, we're looking for explanations. And when you try to pinpoint the explanations, they're not the same. They're different for each of those games. So I think if you're trying to kind of square this in your head as a fan, what I would say is, in one respect, that's actually a positive thing. And I'll tell you why. It's because if it was the same recurring problem over and over, well, then that means your team has a problem they can't fix.
Yeah.
And the other good, I think, or the other consideration, I guess I should say, is this didn't happen against bottom feeding teams. It happened against some of the best teams in the NFL. And if you make mistakes against teams like that, you will lose, right? So, you can kind of, at least you can sleep at night by kind of telling yourself theoretically, okay, we screwed up against Tom Brady. We lost. Yes. That's not very hard to accept. Lamar Jackson, we gave him a lot of opportunities and he beat you. Yes. That's not hard to accept, right? So I guess what I'm getting at is, it's terrible and it shouldn't happen, and they're going to have a lot of regrets about it. But I get it, and I also don't think it suggested there's some kind of fundamental problem with the team. So glass half full, I guess.
This channel is proudly sponsored by the Backroom Collection. They do beautiful sports canvas art with football, basketball, baseball, and other sports themes. Special orders are accepted and autograph pieces are available. Many Indianapolis Colts signed pieces will be available beginning in November. Just use your discount code CL10 to purchase the pieces you want to spice up your living area. That's CL10. Yep. With Buffalo, the Buffalo game, it put a lot of, in the fans' eyes at that time when we beat Buffalo, we can finally beat a good team. And now Buffalo has just went downhill. They won their last game, but they've lost quite a few in a row against good teams. And now this game, how big was this victory against the Patriots? Not just for fans. Obviously, for fans, it was huge. But for the organization itself?
I think pretty big. I really think that, as you said, I think the Buffalo win, I think it's still a big deal for me and for them, not because they beat Buffalo, not because Buffalo is a contender, because we thought they were, and I don't know that they are now, right? I mean, at the start of the season, they were my pick for the AFC. But anyhow, be that as it may, I think that win is still big though for this reason. It's because of how they did it. It was emphatic. I mean, they didn't just kind of like do it the way the Patriots did it, and I'm not taking anything away from the Patriots win over Buffalo. They're a different kind of win than the one the Colts had. The Colts dominated them. They were never in the game. They never had a chance. That game was literally never in doubt. So that was a very different manner, the way they won that game. That's as dominant a win as the Colts have had in years, honestly. And it came against a really good team. Josh Allen, by the way, is still a damn good quarterback. Okay.
Right.
A couple of weeks later, I think it was, who were they playing? I forget. But I mean, Josh Allen, in Tampa. I mean, Josh Allen went crazy. They lost the game. But I mean, the guy had a phenomenal performance in that game. You didn't see any of that against the Bucs. Against the Colts, I should say. So anyway, getting back to Sunday or Saturday night, I should say. I think that game was big because this team, you talk about a challenge like that, the number one team in the AFC, and there being still maybe some doubts out there about the Colts. They're sensitive to that, and I think maybe sometimes it might be just a rallying cry, motivational tactic, I guess, but whatever, they believe it. So whatever works for you. I think for them, they really feel like they made a statement. And I know it's not college football. I know there are no voters and there's no committee making the decisions. You got to win, and that's all it boils down to. But I do think that does breed confidence. That team's going to go to Arizona this week and feel like they can't lose. And they can lose, certainly. I mean, you still got to deal with some really good players out there in Arizona. But I mean, this Colts team, they don't think they can lose right now. They really don't. And I don't think they should feel that way. And so that's what winning a game like that does. I mean, I was in that stadium on Saturday night, and if you were there, I mean, you can't help but really, I think, sense the confidence and the just the fuel that was kind of being exuded, not just by the fans, but I think just the players and the way some of their reactions, and they're feeding off of that crowd. That tells me that's a team with a lot of confidence right now. And I think that confidence gets impacted if you lose a big game like that, because look at the build up to that game, prime time. I mean, you put a lot of energy and emotion into that. And if you lose it, then, I mean, you can't tell me that's not a hit to your confidence. It has to be. So to win it keeps that confidence going, and it actually builds it even more.
Oh, yeah. Losing a game that victory, I don't know if you saw Bill Belichick's press conference after the game, but he just did not want to talk to anybody. He was just like, we didn't play well. We didn't do this. Nobody played well enough to win this game. And that's all he said over and over and over. He did not want to be there. You talk about how, the Colts right now feel like they can't beat. They can't be beat. They have that high confidence. One of the reasons for that high confidence, they have 31 takeaways this year so far with 3 games left. I'm going to take you back to preseason before the season started. And Darius and them said 40 turnovers is our goal. And he basically got laughed out. Right. I mean, come on. We all did. Yeah. Even myself, I was like, 40, come on now. I get you want a high goal, but I mean, come on. They need 3 turnovers on average the last 3 games to reach that goal right now. What do you think is making this team so good at turning the ball over right now?
I think it's a good question. And I think what I tell people is that doesn't happen by accident. You have to preach it. You have to teach it. You have to drill it. It has to be fundamental. And frankly, I think Matt Eberflus deserves a lot of credit because, we can quibble about coverages and why they play this coverage then or that time or this time. That is fine. That is totally fine. No coach is perfect. But I think where we sometimes don't give him enough credit is in how he develops players. And what he does is, now I get it, look, we want to see more pass rush and all that. But the one thing I would give him a lot of credit for is developing players in terms of habits and a defensive culture. And the culture is we take the ball away and we're always going for the football. I mean, it's what they teach and as I said, what they preach. I mean, look at Darius Leonard. I know he was doing this in college on some level as well, sort of these punch outs. So it's not like he started that when he got to the Colts, but you can't argue that they haven't helped him take it to another level. So a lot of that's instinctive. Okay. You can't necessarily teach what he does. Okay. So I'm not going to give Matt Eberflus credit for that. That's crazy. However, two things. Number one, he's on the perfect team because that's part of their culture anyway. And then number two, it's infectious. It's contagious. Okay, you got other guys now going for the football. They can't do what Darius Leonard does because that's a talent. That's a very specific talent. But I think it's in their heads, at the forefront of their minds. They're always looking for the football. And then it also is combined with the way they play schematically, because look at, for example, Bobby Okereke's interception. I mean, these guys are playing with eyes on the quarterback, and that's part of their scheme. When you play with eyes on the quarterback, you're going to be able to break on the football in many instances and get some opportunities. Darius Leonard's interception on Saturday night, he's just kind of lurking in the middle of the field. He's not playing a man. He's playing his own, granted, but he's playing with his eyes on the quarterback, and he baits him, and he sort of gets him slipping. So Mac Jones thinks that he's coming maybe to get him. Maybe he thinks it's a blitz, or maybe he thinks he's playing the run. I don't know what he thinks, but he didn't think he was going to drop. And so Darius Leonard got the drop on him there, no pun intended. So I guess what I'm saying is, with the turnovers, it's very much a part of the culture and the coaching and the teaching. And as I said, I mean, there's a reason they're better at it than other teams. It's not accidental. And they have now made this, I think it's going to be a staple of what they do, because it also extends to the personnel department, because Chris Ballard and his scouts, when they go out there and they look for players, they're looking for players who can take the ball away. If they're maybe a little undersized, or maybe they don't meet this metric or that metric, but they can take the ball away, they're going to get graded really high by the Colts, because that's what they want. And listen, the effect over the course of 17 games, can you imagine what that impact is for Carson Wentz and Jonathan Taylor and Frank Reich as the play caller? You give them all these extra opportunities. There's a reason the Colts are one of the highest scoring teams in the NFL right now, and a big reason for it is part of what we're talking about, takeaways.
Absolutely. Speaking of Frank Reich and play calling, after that 1-4 start, 1-4 start, there was a lot of fans out there calling for Frank Reich's job. I don't know if you remember that. And I was just really? Really? I mean, come on. And then I go and I see this stat pop up. Frank Reich, in his tenure as a Colts head coach, has scored at least 23 points in over 75% of his games. That's better than any Colts coach in history, right? Percentage-wise, scoring at least 23 points in his games. And he's 4-0 now, coming off the bye week. What are your thoughts on Frank Reich as a play caller and a head coach so far this season?
I think he's a fantastic coach. And I mean, look, do I like the guy personally? Yes. I don't have any problem stating that. I mean, it's great when you can actually have a working relationship with someone you actually like. I've covered coaches who I hated, so none here specifically, but I'm just saying, that's always a benefit, and I'm fine saying that. However, I can admit that and also be objective about it too, and I've written critical stories when they were warranted about Frank Reich, but the bottom line is I think you got to take it on the whole and look at the entire picture. And there's no question when you think about the inconsistency they have had at the quarterback position over these 4 years. I mean, no one in football has dealt with that. Okay, 4 different quarterbacks in 4 years. Any team that's dealt with that, I guarantee you, I don't know this off the top of my head, but I guarantee any team that has dealt with that is one of the absolute worst teams in football. I guarantee you. Because it just doesn't happen. And if it happens, you suck, generally. So it's not rocket science. I can say that without really even doing the math on it. I feel pretty confident. So anyway, so he's risen above that. And then you've also got a situation where they have had some difficulties at the start of their seasons. 2018, it's really not that hard to understand why they started slow. I mean, think about it. They had new offense, new defensive schemes. Andrew Luck hadn't played for 2 years. You've got certainly a lot of new players in new positions. I mean, that's just a lot going on. And they were playing close games, right? So anyway, they come back from 1-5. You saw what they did in 2018. This year, very much the same. They started slow for very understandable reasons. I mean, they were a complete mess in training camp. We didn't see the entire roster till about 6 weeks in. Okay.
Right.
So yeah, they weren't very good to start the season. Duh. And I think you've seen what he's done. And I think held that ship sturdy and steady in what was a pretty big storm. That is a coach who has the full confidence and command of his players. And that is something that I think he has a talent for. Frank Reich, and I know you didn't ask me about this from this perspective. I know you're talking more so about the X's and O's, but I think this is important because I think sometimes the X's and O's don't work out if you don't have the player's confidence. And he does. I think the one other thing that I wrote about this a few years ago when he was in his first year, I kind of did it tongue in cheek, like, how does he not curse? T.Y. Hilton was telling me about a game where I forget which game it was, but something happened. He was so mad, and he's like, I thought he was going to curse, but he didn't. And what's my point is this, that he has this talent for being demanding, but also doing it in such a way that he instills confidence in the players. Jack Doyle has explained this to me really well. He said, it's really a very difficult thing to really get a lot out of your guys by being hard on them, but also, making them feel like they can do anything. And it's almost like good advice for us as parents. It's like, how do you encourage your kids, but also, be really demanding and make them understand that, like, second isn't good enough. Second place isn't good enough. You know what I mean? And that's what he does. It's a talent, and that's why he's a good leader. So now go to the meeting room, and you're talking about what you're going to run on Sunday, and how you get a player prepared during practice and all of that. All of that then comes into focus. Those tactics that he uses, that's how he uses those tactics in preparing his players. And then I think really when you just look at it from an X and O standpoint, I think that his play calling, I think very inventive. I mean, I look at the first touchdown on Saturday night. That's a fantastic play. Fantastic.
That earned him $20.
That's right. Well, I threw in 20 also, so I guess I'm in the hole. I got to get his memo. And I mean, how many teams out there are running stuff like that?
Right.
That we see some, but I mean, two things: to have the confidence to call that against a Bill Belichick defense, and also I think the understanding that you can utilize two of your best players who are really unique players, and Nyheim Hines and Jonathan Taylor. I've been a big advocate for getting those two guys on the field together. You can't do it all the time. Okay, because there's just too many moving parts to have two running backs out there all the time. But I think when you can do it, it opens up so many possibilities, and you're starting to see them do that more. I'm very, very much in favor of that. So anyway, I think you're seeing it in how they get role players to play key roles. Ashton Doolin, look at the role that he's had in maybe the past month. You wouldn't have predicted that, to start the season. He's done it with Zach Pascal the last 3 years, even though I think Zach has taken a little step back this year. Definitely, Zach Pascal, I think, benefited from being in this organization with that coach, and that list is very long too. There's lots of others. And all of that goes back to some of the things I was talking about earlier. His ability, Frank Reich's ability to get these guys to play confident and to get the best out of them. There are a lot of coaches who aren't capable of doing that at the same level. So he's definitely a guy who has proven that he can do that.
Yeah, I've been we're coming up on an end. I've had you now for over 30 minutes, so I'll close this down for just one last statement, and then I'll let you talk about where people can find you again at the end of the show. But you were talking about having Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines on the field at the same time. I was preaching that at the beginning of the year, especially when I knew who, Marcus Brady, and, he came from where he's come from and understands the RPOs. And I was like, that would be freaking awesome. Right. And we didn't see it early in the season. We've seen it a lot more the last 5-6 games. I would love to see more of that. I am 100% with you on that, where you get them, because that creates such a problem for the defense to figure out what you're going to do. Is Jonathan Taylor going to get the handoff up the gut? And then if you close in and pitch it out to Hines, you're screwed, because you done closed in on Taylor. And then if you fake that out and you brought a safety down, now you got, Carson Wentz, who you talked about earlier, can put the ball anywhere on the field, so it creates so many problems. First off, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. It was an honor to have you on. Go ahead and tell people again, one more time before we get out of here, where they can find you. And if there's anything else that you want to, throw out there before we end this.
Yeah. Well, I would just say the only last comment I would say is that I think that the Colts have I think that game Saturday night, I think, was probably a reminder of why you love following the Colts if you're a fan, And I just would say that it's been a long time since that stadium felt like that. And look,
loud.
Yeah, it was really loud. And I think Mac Jones can say what he wants. There's no question the sound was a problem for them. There's no question about it. They were out of sorts and all that. But anyhow, so, look, if you were there as a fan and you're out there listening, look, you had a little hand in that. You had played a little tiny role in that. So, hey, pat yourself on the back. And anyway, what I'm saying is I hope that continues, because listen, I've done this for 25 years, and I have covered good teams, terrible teams, teams somewhere in the middle, and there's nothing more enjoyable than when you're covering a team that matters and they're playing in games that matter. So I am all for it. Okay, let me just be clear. As much as people think sports writers enjoy teams losing, don't get me wrong. I have no problem covering a losing team and telling it like it is. And they will not enjoy reading my stories. Okay, it is what it is. But I have no timidity about that. However, like I said, my most enjoyable seasons doing this job in general are the seasons that were special. The seasons where Miami won the national championship, and I was able to follow them along that road, back when Miami played football. For example, 2018, that season was one of my most memorable seasons as a journalist, because it's just so fun, just unique. You kept thinking it was going to end at some point, and it didn't end. It just took it all the way to the playoffs. So anyway, I guess what I'm saying is those are the moments that are fun. And so, value that when you get a chance, because they don't take them for granted. Don't take people in Indianapolis in particular, I think, have taken it for granted and haven't been someone who's come from other places. I have a different perspective on that. And so I like to always remind Colts fans, don't take that stuff for granted. It's hard. Okay. It is hard. Go talk to a Lions fan someday,
Or
So
a
anyway,
Jags fan.
Anyway, those are just my parting thoughts. If you, as you said, if you want to find me, obviously The Athletic, we'd love to have you. If you're not a subscriber, we got some great content with myself, Zach Kiefer, and Bob Kravitz, and certainly all across the league and other leagues as well. And then on Twitter, Holder Stephen with a PH. Lots of opinions on all of these matters we've talked about, and probably a whole lot more. So yeah, love to follow along.
Awesome. Thank you again for joining. And until next time, I'm Lawrence Owen. That is Stephen Holder from The Athletic. And until next time, go Colts.